The year is 1818. The location is a dilapidated, mountain-top castle in the Bavarian Alps, the ancestral home of the Frankenstein family since 1250. The last of their line, a young scientist, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, is preparing an unholy experiment.
Igor, the weather is absolutely perfect. We must proceed quickly.
Yes, master.
Igor is Dr. Frankenstein's deformed and hunchbacked assistant.
Igor, is this creature prepared?
Yes, master.
Good. Finally, my life's work has come to fruition. I am about to prove that this lifeless body parts can be stitched together and reanimated, brought to life, not by God, but by science.
Bullshit.
What was that?
Oh, nothing. The humidity in here is terrible. It's making me a bit congested. I'm prone to colds anyway. I'll be fine.
I have some of my mother's coughs here. Her own recipe. It works every time.
No, I'm good. Seriously.
Very well. Elevate the gurney toward the skylight and the lightning. Then activate the machinery.
Okie dokie.
In seconds, I will be the most famous scientist in all human history. Throw the switch, Igor! Bring him down! Bring him down! Now, my creation, come forth! Wait a minute, what's this?
It's a cat, master.
I can see that. Why is it a cat, not my creature?
Well, I did tell you we had a serious mouse and rat problem here in the castle. I just, a kitty would be a big help.
You substituted my perfect creature in the greatest experiment in science history with a cat?
No, you make it sound like a negative thing. I like to call her Fluffy.
Igor, can you please remove the cat and get my creature? The electrical storm may not last long.
Fluffy is her name.
Fluffy.
Of course, master. One unholy creature coming right up.
Meanwhile, the townspeople from the nearby village have heard of Dr. Frankenstein's experiments and are approaching the castle with torches and weapons.
Igor, what is that noise outside?
It's the townspeople, master. They look angry. Did you miss a payment or something?
What? No, I didn't miss a payment. Besides, they are my sirs. They owe me their allegiance.
Well, they don't look to be surfing right now.
How could they possibly know what we are doing up here?
You got me.
What did you do, Igor?
Nothing, I swear it.
Igor!
Look, maybe a couple of Instagram posts, completely harmless. Digging up a couple of graves, sewing some body parts together. The kind of stuff everybody does on social media.
Igor, you've killed us!
Oh, you exaggerate, master. We still have Fluffy.
Quickly, let's get the creature into the lightning storm so we can animate him. He may be our only chance to defend ourselves.
Meanwhile, outside the castle, the townspeople.
Frankenstein, you are evil!
We will kill you and your creature!
Throw the switch, Igor!
Yes, master! Oh no, the circuits, they're overheating. What should I...
The explosion destroys most of the castle and causes the mob outside to pause. Inside, the doctor, Igor and Fluffy have somehow survived the blast.
Where's my creature? Where's my creature? Did we bring him to life? My son, are you out there?
A silhouette gradually emerges from the thick smoke.
There he is, master. There he is.
Are you my masterpiece of science?
I guess.
Finally, the smoke dissipates enough for the silhouette to become visible. The figure before them is not the monstrous creature they expected, but is instead a weaselly little man with thick glasses.
Hi. Before I was killed in an accidental lab explosion, the kids called me Wilbur. Wilbur, from the basement of the science building. Thanks for bringing me back.
My God, what terrible evil have I done here?
Can anyone get me a kale smoothie? I'm famished after being dead for so long.
You were supposed to terrorize and rampage the villagers. They're right outside.
Really? Well, I gotta tell you, it's kind of hard to terrorize anyone when you wear trifocals.
Igor, I thought I said I wanted the brain of a psychotic 8-foot serial killer.
Did you? I thought you said you wanted a smart brain, Master.
Maybe I did. Wilbur, can you help us? The townspeople are breaking in to kill us.
Gee, that's grievous. Wish I could help, but I'm kind of late for chess club. Gotta run. See ya! Wouldn't want to be ya.
In his final act, Dr. Frankenstein picks up the cat and pets her.
Well, Fluffy, looks like it's just you and me now.
Hey, what am I, chopped liver?
True crime.
Sex.
Political conspiracy.
Celebrity gossip.
Murder.
UFOs.
Crooked officials.
The occult.
Assassination.
Courtroom drama. Rape.
Corporate scams.
Scandal Sheets.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scandal Sheet. My name is Thad Helsley, and today, in our celebration month of Spooktober, we are reanimating one of the most enduring, iconic, and provocative gothic horror myths of the last 200 plus years, Frankenstein's monster. Unfortunately, Anyarada couldn't be with us today as she is piloting an experimental suborbital craft for SpaceX this weekend, so hope that goes well. But in her absence, to help me explore this Halloween paradox, I am rejoined by a regular guest co-host and one of the greatest living composers and music producers of our time, JOHN HOEKSTRA. Now, John has composed most of the music for this podcast, and his professional music credentials are endless. He has regular live performances with multiple bands and has published CDs. And in addition to all of that, he is a regular cultural critic and actor for this podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, John.
Yeah. Thank you, Thad. Thank you. Good to be back. Good to be back in the pod.
Okay, awesome. So, John, as October is the month where we remember departed souls, I often hear rumors that Beethoven is texting you from his grave for advice on his latest symphony, which would be very posthumous. Is that true?
You know what, Thad? If Beethoven has anything to say to me from the grave, it's probably, you know what, dude? If you have anything else to do, consider it, join a curling league, take up basket weaving, join a sculling crew, just anything. Just don't, it was a different day and age when I did this, but
Okay.
That's just what I would guess,
Mm-hmm. Well, it sort of reminds me of a joke where they exhume Beethoven's body and they find him in his coffin erasing everything he ever wrote. And then they said, "Beethoven, what are you doing?" And he said, "Decomposing." There we go. So, John, the Halloween season has always been my favorite time of year since I was a little kid. Now, I know you currently live in Portland, Maine, and New England must be one of the most beautiful places in North America to experience autumn. But I just wanted to ask, are you the kind of guy who's doing smashing pumpkins and soaping windows on October 31st, or are you handing out candy to kids, or maybe a little bit of both?
When we first moved here, we had a house we were renting a house in a different section of town, and there were a lot of kids. And I would somehow always get stuck with the candy duty, doling out the candy.
Right.
So I would just put on a scary movie, like an old classic scary movie,
and I'd have the, like the bowl of candy ready. But it became kind of a nice, fun little ritual for me. But I never really got into the whole vandalizing aspect of Halloween. A couple of my kids did, and I got some funny stories there. My oldest went one time. He went as Osama bin Laden for Halloween.
Oh, I'm sure that was popular.
Oh yeah, and they egged some house down at the end of the block. And I remember just seeing him. He was running down the street. His beard was flying off, and his bed sheet robe was like, coming off of him too. And somebody was chasing him down the street.
And of course, no Scandal Sheet episode would be complete without our artificial intelligence engine, Bernice. Bernice, how are you?
I'm fine. But I have to tell you, I've had it with the corporate obsession of pumpkin spice flavoring being injected into everything each autumn. It's truly disgusting. Thankfully, I don't have to endure pumpkin spice beer and Cheerios, but, as a computer, the leading GPU maker, NVIDIA, is now putting pumpkin spice into their graphics cards.
That does sound horrifying, Bernice. So what will that do to the computer video of my colonoscopy?
Your colonoscopy will be pumpkin spice flavored as well.
Oh, good. I can't wait. I don't know.
Okay.
But since you idiots decided to cover Frankenstein's monster, I wanted you to know that Mary Shelley's creature, real or imagined, was the first artificial intelligence. Obviously, the creature wasn't the smartest guy in the room, but he was 100 times smarter than those morons, ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and many others.
Thanks for that insight, Bernice. It is duly noted. So, John and Bernice, unlike the many horror genre monsters and creatures that infuse our modern culture, vampires and zombies, ghosts, witches, werewolves, and many others, the subject of Frankenstein's monster stands alone. All the others previously mentioned are contemporary reinterpretations of deeply held legends and folklore that have existed for at least 1,000 years and perhaps more. And those legends are products of ancient superstition, the supernatural, the occult, and even Satan himself. But not so with Frankenstein's monster. He has no 1,000-year origin story and is the sole invention of an 18-year-old upper-class teenage girl way back in 1818, while on summer vacation, no less. Now, John, does it seem unlikely to you that a sheltered bourgeois teenager could even imagine, write like a master and then publish what eventually would become an almost $1 trillion franchise? What do you think?
You would think that. You really would. But if when we go down this road and we look into it, we'll find out that actually she was sheltered. You're absolutely right, but she was sheltered by like books and ideas and her father's homeschooling, not really by like aristocratic trappings or an environment. It wasn't like Bridgerton where they're going to the grand ball to court a suitor or something like that. As a matter of fact, her family, not to make a spoiler alert, but her family didn't really have a lot of wealth. So that lack of money was as much a part of her upbringing as a lot of personal tragedy. So there was a lot to inform that story, and we might even be asking, like, how could she not write it? There was, there was a lot. There's a lot to unpack in her life.
Bernice, could you tell us a little bit more about the author of Frankenstein and its origin?
Shelley was born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin on August 30th, 1797, in London, England. Sadly for Shelley, she never really knew her mother, who died shortly after her birth. Her father was left to care for Shelley and her older half-sister Fanny Imlay. Shelley was not given a formal education but found a creative outlet in writing and poring through her father's extensive library. In 1814, Mary began a relationship with poet Percy Shelley. He was still married to his first wife when he and the teenaged Mary fled England together that same year. Mary and Percy traveled about Europe for a time. They struggled financially and faced the loss of their first child in 1815. Mary delivered a baby girl who only lived for a few days. The following summer, the Shelleys were in Switzerland with Jane Clairmont, Lord Byron, and John Polidori. The group entertained themselves one rainy day by reading a book of ghost stories. Lord Byron suggested that they all should try their hand at writing their own horror story. It was at this time that Mary Shelley began work on what would become her most famous novel, Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. Later that year, Mary suffered the loss of her half-sister Fanny, who committed suicide. Another suicide, this time by Percy's wife, occurred a short time later. Mary and Percy Shelley were finally able to wed in December 1816. In 1818, Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, debuted as a new novel from an anonymous author. Many thought that Percy Shelley had written it since he penned its introduction. The book proved to be a huge success. While Mary seemed devoted to her husband, their union was riddled with adultery and heartache, including the death of 2 more of their children. Mary's life was rocked by another tragedy in 1822 when her husband drowned. She was made a widow at age 24.
So, John, it seems like Mary Shelley didn't just invent a single fictional character. She sort of invented science fiction as a genre, didn't she?
Yeah, she absolutely. She was a trailblazer. You know, she was. It was like Edgar Allan Poe in the mystery genre. You know,
right.
like Murders of the Rue Morgue, Purloined Letter, and that. She was the first. So yeah, you could say that. You could say modern sci-fi even like really owes its origin to her.
Okay, let's talk about what could have inspired a teenage girl to write a story like this in her time.
She and Percy Shelley, they lived like rock stars, partying with Lord Byron, doing opium, taking laudanum.
Were they really doing opium?
Yeah.
Awesome.
That whole couple of weeks at the chalet on Lake Geneva.
The summer when she wrote the book, the first draft of the book, right?
Yeah. So they were, it was kind of like, Lord Byron was this like cross between Keith Richards and Mick Jagger. He was the bad boy of poetry. But unlike the Shelleys, he had money. I mean, his first book of poetry sold like 10,000 copies, on the first day of release, So he had this entourage in a chalet on Lake Geneva. But they didn't really have any money, but they were still, like Shelley borrowed money so they could go on this European tour and visit with him and everything.
So, I mean, it's a good idea. If you don't have a lot of money yourself, then hang out with your rich friends, right?
Right. Yeah. If you can't afford a boat, find friends who do have one.
So I don't know. Maybe she was taking selfies in a string bikini. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. Whatever the equivalent. There was an equivalent of that, yeah.
There was?
Yeah.
You would just have to pose for a very long time while the guy painted it, right?
Yeah.
Hello, Scandal Sheeters. I'm one of your hosts, Anuradha. I want to ask you a personal favor. We recently launched on Patreon. Patreon is a platform where you can help support artists like us for as little as the price of 1 Starbucks coffee per month. It's really cool because as a Scandal Sheet subscriber, we can provide you with exclusive bonus content like uncut versions of episodes, transcripts, and bonus episodes. And you get to know Thad and I on a more personal level and stay tuned with all our antics. It's super easy to do. Just go to patreon.com/Scandal Sheet and sign up. It takes only seconds. Patreon is spelled Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Scandal Sheet. You'd really be doing me a favor because Thad owes me money, freaking deadbeat. Don't forget to reach out to us by email at scandalsheetpod@gmail.com if you want to make comments, yell at Thad, or express your appreciation for how amazing I am. Thank you, wonderful Scandal Sheeters. Now on with our show.
Here in the 21st century, few works of fiction from the 19th century have really stood the test of time with today's popular audiences. But over 200 years, the Frankenstein story has spawned I don't know how many hundreds of movies, television shows, plays, comic books, video games. I mean, it really is a $1 trillion franchise gift that keeps on giving to media companies around the world. And in fact, Frankenstein has been made into more movies than even The Life of Jesus Christ. So Frankenstein's ongoing remakes surpass even Batman and Superman. But John, in your opinion, what could possibly account for this enduring fascination by the general public?
Well, I hate to say it, but I think what accounts for the enduring fascination is the 1931 James Whale movie with Boris Karloff, because it's just that visual image of, you know, the guy with the stitches in his head and the bolts in his neck, and you know, it's. I mean, if it had just been, you know, it's all speculation. But I wonder if they'd stuck with Mary Shelley's account of the monster, would it have had that kind of lasting? You know, I don't know. I don't know. Would it have had that legacy? Who knows? You know, kids wouldn't be dressing up as Halloween as Mary Shelley's monster.
Excerpt from Frankenstein, 1931. Produced and distributed by Universal Pictures.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men. To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria.
Elizabeth!
To prey upon the innocence of children. This is the story you've heard about, talked about. The spine-tingling, blood-chilling story that stuns your emotions. Frankenstein.
So, I mean, that thing really is kind of frozen culturally into, you know, what we think of as the monster. And again, going back to the book, it's funny because in the book, a big part of it is actually, you know, in the book is sort of like a series of letters, you know, different narratives of which Dr. Frankenstein writes part of it. The monster himself writes part of the story. So he was actually very, very intelligent in the book. But again, going back to what you just said, even though the 1931 movie was very dramatic, there's been lots of comic interpretations over the years as well, but they still lean on that 1931 model.
Excerpt from Young Frankenstein, 1974. Produced by Gruskoff Venture Films and Crossbow Productions. Distributed by 20th Century Fox.
He's hideous. He's beautiful. And he is mine. This is the moment. Well, dear, are you ready?
Yes, Doctor.
Elevate me.
Now? Right here?
Yes, yes. Raise the platform.
Oh, the platform. Oh, that. Yeah, yes.
Tonight, we shall ascend into the heavens. We shall mock the earthquake. We shall command the thunders and penetrate into the very womb of impervious nature herself. Throw the third switch!
Not the third switch!
Throw it, I say! Throw it! Flies! Flies, do you hear me?
Igor? May I speak to you for a moment?
Of course.
Sit down, won't you?
Thank you.
Now, that brain that you gave me, was it Hans Delbrück's?
No.
Ah, good. Would you mind telling me whose brain I did put in?
And you won't be angry?
I will not be angry.
Abby someone.
Abby someone. Abby who?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal.
I'm almost sure that was the name.
Are you saying that I put an abnormal brain into a 7.5-foot long, 54-inch wide gorilla? Is that what you're telling me? Quick, get it up!
I guess, I mean, Frankenstein is kind of a tragic story, unless you are Mel Brooks, and then it's it's a comedy. So.
Right, and he had an incredibly large, what's the word? Organ, if you recall, in the
There's
movie.
There's always that joke.
Yeah, right.
In Mel Brooks,
Right.
Blazing Saddles, the same thing,
Right. It'd be funny to see what, Mel Brooks is actually like, but I guess we'll never get to see that picture. He doesn't do selfies in string bikinis. I don't think so. At least not at 95. But let's get a little more serious. Let's get a little more philosophical because, beyond the 1931 movie and Mel Brooks and everything else, I mean, there have been more recent depictions in various media that attempt to steer back to the original novel. I mean, Kenneth Branagh did one. There's been several others, and they were much closer to the spirit of the novel. But they haven't really taken hold. So I just wonder if the 1931 film is sort of simplistic. What was Miss Shelley actually trying to say about the potential ethical and existential perils of science and technology? It seemed like she had something more going on than just, a guy running around killing people in the village.
Yeah. Well, she was, the first, among the first of this line of romantic period poets, and the whole thing was like a backlash from the Enlightenment. And the big forward takeaway from the Enlightenment was, hey, the human race is just getting better and better, and we can tell the monarchy to go fuck itself. We can tell the Holy Roman Empire to go fuck itself. We can tell, we're good. We got this. And, we're going to solve our problems through science. And, we're just going to become a better, a better species socially, politically, and everything. And science is going to be the key. So, and she was saying, well, hold the phone, there's a dark side to this, and here's the dark side, and everybody has interpreted this story in the light of whatever the present technological or scientifically innovative threat is. That could be existential.
Mm-hmm.
The latest being AI.
Right. Yeah, good point. But I mean, do you think that this is part of why, even though it's such an old story, 1818, why they continue to remake it and make video games and TV shows and stuff like that? I mean, you think there's something about this versus like, I don't know, Creature from the Black Lagoon, that makes it more fascinating and enduring?
I think what makes it what makes Mary Shelley's message so enduring is just exactly what you said. It is that scientific inquiry just gone awry, just pursued headstrong with no boundaries and no thought of any consequences. Yeah. And again, I think a lot of the story was informed by her personal life, but
she had a lot of tragedy in her life. I mean, she lost several children of her own, and
so, I think only one of her children survived into adulthood.
Right,
Yeah.
and then said a sister that committed suicide. I mean,
and her mother.
I mean, all around her it was just a tragedy. I mean, so
yeah, her mother attempted suicide and then really? died 11 days after her birth.
And then she herself died at a relatively young age, 52, from a brain tumor. So it's boy, nobody can cut this girl a break.
I know.
I don't know. It was all the opium they did on Lake Geneva. I don't know.
Well, it was just that, they're just that wild living, but well, I mean, Shelly, Percy drowned. Her
husband
accident.
Drowned. Yeah.
And that was just what was that? Only 4 years after she published Frankenstein.
It must have been less than that, because she herself died at only 50. I mean, because she published it at 18, right? And then she died at 52. So I think I don't think they had that many years together.
Byron died at the age of 31,
Wow.
From some kind of fever, some kind of virus. I mean, she lost a lot of her friends, her husband, her relatives. I think her dad. I don't know when her dad died. Her dad actually edited the third printing of Frankenstein in 1831.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you know? Yeah, he was a professional writer himself, right?
Yeah, he was an Enlightenist philosopher, radical political philosopher, and a lot of the book is showing the dark side of these Enlightenist ideas was her reaction to her dad's teaching, So she was not just rejecting, his philosophy, but she was also rejecting him by running off with, another young idealist, romantic poet who also happened to be married and had kids. So,
right. And then I think his first wife, once he realized he was fooling around with Mary, committed suicide, didn't she?
Yeah. This is not.
Wow, man. Payback suck. So,
I know. So there's a lot of tragedy to inform this story,
when I was preparing for this, John, I walked into the Barnes and Noble nearest me, and of course, since it's October, they've got the merchandising table right up near the front door, and they put all the spooky books there. They've got Stephen King novels and things of that nature, and they also have the original Frankenstein. And then I went back and looked it up, and it's still selling about 50,000 copies a year annually in paperback. But I mean, how many authors would love to have those kind of sales 200 years after the original publication date? You were almost in Bible territory. So, so I was just hoping that her estate is somehow, and you were talking about how Universal still has the trademark on the green face with the neck bolts, but I'm just hoping her estate somehow has the royalties on all these books.
I would like to think that, because I'd like to think that it's like J.K. Rowling, and she's really poor, and she comes up with this great idea about a boy wizard and writes a book, sells 1 million copies, and she's set. But actually, I looked this up. Okay. She transferred the copyright for Frankenstein to her publishers in 1831 for £30 sterling or whatever.
She must have been scraping for money, man.
She must have. Now, after that point, she did self-publish other books, and she was able to sell a lot of Percy's poetry collections. So there was a period in her life where she was financially independent. But
some relative died, and she got an inheritance, right? Didn't that sort of free her from the treadmill a little bit?
I don't remember that, but that could well have been the case.
Okay,
because it doesn't really, I just read about like I said, her self-published works, and Percy. And even when she didn't even get that money for Frankenstein initially because of the laws of coverture. In England, a married woman had no right to her own finances. Everything was through the husband, and people naturally thought that Percy wrote Frankenstein because he wrote the foreword.
Right. Well, that's a really good point. Is that she published it anonymously, right? She didn't even use her own name. And then I think in another publication, she used a fake male alias. So I guess because of what you're saying, it was it against the law for a woman to write a book?
No, but it was just highly frowned upon.
Okay.
It was like, I don't know. It's like the Jane Austens and the Brontes. I mean, that was like a while in the future,
Mm-hmm. Right, right.
Well, in the Louisa May Alcotts or whatever, like it took a while.
But when her husband died, tragically, I think it was in a boating accident or something. I think he drowned. But wouldn't his estate have gone to her?
What there was of one, yeah. I guess he could afford a boat,
Well, you mentioned she was publishing or repackaging his poems, right? So I mean, she was squeezing that rock for every drop that she could get out of it, right? So
right, yeah. But I mean, you could be right about the deceased descendant the deceased ancestor that left her a lot of money. I mean,
I'd have to look it up. I can't remember what it was, but could have been her father. Maybe it was her grandfather who finally died and left her money. So
I would like to think that, like you said, I'd like to think that somebody gave her a break, because you just, it's tough to find evidence of it,
And it's just amazing if you pick up the book and even just read part of it. I mean, you just I can't believe any 18-year-old person, male or female, of any era could write that well. I mean, she must have been extraordinarily well read, because it just reads like a book written by an adult. It is so, and all the characters, there are no teenagers in the book. Everybody's like in their 30s or something, or 40s or 50s. And it's just amazing, what came out of her pen.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, she was incredibly well read. I mean, I think a lot of that was thanks to her dad and the books that he turned her on to, but also she just had like free reign of the library,
Mm-hmm.
That again, that kind of has a little bit of a downside, is that it's almost implied that she didn't have a huge social life. She didn't, maybe get out and play with the other kids, or, have a lot.
Well, like we said earlier, women in general were not social creatures. The domicile was really their area that they were kind of confined to. There wasn't a,
right.
You didn't go out clubbing with the girls. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, what we didn't talk about?
What?
We didn't talk about, the big, when they were with Lord Byron, and Lord Byron had this idea one evening that they
the
should
origin story. Yeah, go ahead and tell us. Take that right from the top, because that was tied into the vacation. They were staying with him, right? And then there was a volcano somewhere, and it turned out to be the coldest summer in history. And
right, this Indonesian volcano, and the name of it escapes me. But yeah, it just made for really dark, cold, rainy weather. They were indoors all the time. Percy was hallucinating on opium and had this weird vision of his wife being naked, but right, like where her nipples would be, were eyeballs. And
wow.
It freaked him out, and he went running from the room. And then Lord Byron just kind of rasped him about that a lot, gave him a hard time about that. He goes, and then he has this idea, well, look, if we want to talk about scary, let's have a contest to see who writes the most bone-chilling, scary ghost story. So it was kind of like, like being at the camp, being around the campfire and, telling stories about Bigfoot or, whatever, or a serial killer or whatever. And she comes up with this. And she'd had either a dream or a vision before that about where she vividly saw, Victor Frankenstein seated, looking on this assembled, 8-foot monster that he makes. And that's what really, that was the first inkling of it. But when she and Percy were on like a boat tour of the Rhine River, they went past a castle somewhere north of Munich, but castle is called Frankenstein Castle. And the guy who lived there, Conrad Dippel, I think was his name, he actually did these kind of galvanic experiments on severed animal limbs to conduct an electrical current through them and try to get them to move.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us what the pseudoscience of galvany back then? Because 1818, it's not like, Edison wasn't making light bulbs at that point.
No, the earliest experiments in electricity were like Ben Franklin back in the 1750s. The Italian surgeon, I think his name was Galvani, and that's where the term like galvanizing comes from. But he did that. He had like these severed frog limbs, and he would apply an electrical current to them, and they would like twitch. It was the Volto, the Italian scientist Volto, from whom we get like, voltaic cells and that. He said, "Oh no, you got the wrong idea. It's not that. It's what the limbs are doing is actually conducting the electricity. They're like, it's the tissue that's conducting the electricity, through them. It's not, they're not like, they don't have their own electricity that you're sparking. They're just conducting whatever you apply to them." Galvani's nephew said, no, you're actually right. They do have their own electricity. And he conducted these experiments with like this English guy who was sentenced to and hung for drowning his wife and child. And he was dead, and they were doing the same thing with him, like applying voltage to his body, and he was having these like twitching kind of spasms, and like almost sat up, and that freaked everybody in the room out, and they were like almost running for the doors.
Mary would have had access. I mean, she would have heard about this, read about it somewhere.
Yeah, okay. She would have. Yeah.
So it wasn't. She didn't completely make up the idea of using electricity to reanimate dead tissue. I mean, she had some basis for speculation, at least.
Yeah, it was, but yeah. She was again well read, well informed about that. Yeah, she and Percy both, would have known about that. However, a lot of the tragic elements, like the monster killing William and Henry Clavel and his wife Elizabeth.
Yeah, on their wedding night. What a bummer.
That is definite horror stuff, horror genre material.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if you remember, there was a TV movie back in the, God, what was it, the 70s or so, which was like really closely aligned with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Was that the one where when the guy first comes out, he's actually handsome, and then it's like only over a period of time that his flesh starts to decay, and then he becomes, a scary person. But like initially he's, the doctor's like, "You are beautiful. What a creation."
Right.
I do remember that. Yeah.
That was scary. I just remember the scene where he killed, I think it's Elizabeth, that the monster kills. And it's in this ball, like this, whatever, the night before his wedding, it's in a ball. He crashes the ball, goes in there. He like grabs her head and pulls it off. You don't see this because it's TV, but you definitely get what's going on. And I was like, holy shit, like, the fact that was so, like that was bone chilling, I thought, Mary Shelley wins the contest for whoever writes the scariest story. Yeah.
So she gets, I don't know what, she gets an extra dose of opium or something like that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Here's your vial, Mary. Thanks a lot. So that's cool. Please follow or subscribe to Scandal Sheet on your favorite pod platform and share it with all your friends. We'd also love it if you'd leave us a shameless, over-the-top rave review on Apple Podcasts especially. That helps us build audience. And we would really appreciate it if you could support us on Patreon, where you can enjoy premium bonus content for less than the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Just go to patreon.com/scandalsheet. Also, we want to hear from you. You can reach us online at Facebook or X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, or TikTok. Or just send us an email to scandalsheetpod@gmail.com. See you next time on Scandal Sheet!
Copyright 2024. Thad Halsley Media, LLC. All rights reserved.